The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the sprawling fields of golden wheat. The last few rays danced on the edges of the tall stalks, swaying gently in the evening breeze. But beneath the tranquil surface, the tension was building. The crew had come to town that morning, armed with their torches and fueled by greed, ready to take what didn't belong to them. What they didn't know was that the farmer held a fire of his own. As dusk settled, a scattering of laughter and the chinking of metal echoed through an abandoned barn, a sanctuary for those who thrived on chaos. They planned to burn the fields to erase the tracks of this farm from existence. To them, it was just land, a means to an end. But to the farmer, it was home, a vessel of dreams, sweat, and heart. Henry Scott, a man worn by seasons and time, stood on the edge of his land, his hands calloused and heart heavy. He watched the shadows grow long and felt the earth rumble beneath him, not just from the weight of the land but from the burden of despair. This crop was the culmination of years of hard work. Generations had cultivated this soil, and with every fiber of his being, he knew he must protect it. The threats loomed, but deep within him burned an unyielding spirit, a fire no one could extinguish. The crew was reckless, their laughter echoing through the deadening twilight. They teased one another as they surveyed the land, eyes glinting with mischief and malice. They thought they were invincible, unbothered by the haunting shadows of the past. They'd burnt crops before. They'd seen the devastating look in farmers' eyes when their lifeblood went up in flames. But a new thrill surged through them tonight, the thrill of wiping out an entire legacy. With a purpose that galvanized their collective spirit, they reveled in wicked plans, whispering amongst themselves, scheming under the dim light of handheld lanterns. They didn't see the glimmer in the farmer's eye, the flicker of determination igniting from within. They didn't hear the unspoken promise emanating from his solid stance, a pledge that this wouldn't be an easy fight. He'd been through storms that threatened to uproot him, and if necessary, he would face the very flames they set upon him. As darkness deepened, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke. Their torches ignited, bright flames breaking the serenity of the night. Henry felt the air change, a creeping dread curling around him like an unwelcome shroud. But there was more here than fear. There was a fire in him, too, an absolute refusal to let his land fall to ashes. The crew advanced, their laughter fading into low murmurings of anticipation. As the first torch met the dry wheat, flames swallowed it whole. The fire crackled, cracking jokes of its own, a sinister applause to their pressing malevolence. The fields burst into life, leaping, dancing, flickering as shadows of destruction intertwining, vibrant and deadly. It was exhilarating for them, the raw chaos of destruction. But Henry didn't falter. He raced toward the blaze, fueled by instincts honed through years of grief and loss, a primal urge to protect. He reached the flames, heart pounding, and let out a shout that bore the weight of generations. "Stop!" They turned to him, eyes wide with surprise, laughter momentarily silenced. Outnumbered but steadfast, Henry felt the fire of his ancestors ignite within him. They thought they could burn his home, steal his soul, but they underestimated the depth of his attachment to this earth. Year after year, every seed sown carried a story. Every dawn heralded hope. The crew hesitated. It was one old man standing against their recklessness. They mocked him for his bravery, but as they looked into his fierce eyes, a flicker of doubt danced upon the edge of their bravado. They were tough, hardened by their past, but somewhere deep within, even they knew what it meant to protect what you love. Henry shouted, voice steady, unwavering, but they just laughed, emboldened by their numbers. They were too far gone, blinded by the thrill of destruction. And that's when something unexpected happened. Instead of retreating in fear, Henry retreated to gather his strength. He raced back to the heart of his farm, where years of toil were locked away. Within a weathered shed, he kept something valuable, a forgotten relic of a life before modern conveniences, an old fire truck, long since out of service but still filled with just enough water to make a difference. The crew stood bewildered for a moment, wondering where their adversary had gone. Henry was a silhouette against the encroaching flames, a haunting reminder of what it meant to fight against the tide. He reappeared, standing tall, and for the first time they realized this wasn't just an old man, this was a guardian of the land they had chosen to destroy. His heart raced as he struggled to start the engine of the truck, the roar of machinery igniting a new wave of courage deep inside. With every sputter, he envisioned the future he fought to protect, the hands that had helped plant every inch of land and the unwavering spirit that lived through him. He thought about his late father who had taught him the rhythm of tilling the land and the value of hard work. He thought about his wife, seated on the porch at sunset with him, savoring the results of their labor. He would not let them down. The truck roared to life, drowning out the crackling sound of the flames. The crew turned, their ridiculous bravado faltering. They met his gaze, eyes wide as they started to understand what this fire would mean to him. Not just a mere struggle for land, but a fight for love, history, and hope. Henry swung the hose over his shoulder, aimed steady, and unleashed a torrent of water at the flames. It hissed and spluttered, roaring back with steam, waking the earth beneath him as it fought against the swirling inferno. Each pulse of water felt like sending a piece of himself into the fight, pouring in his anger and despair, all mixed with the hope for a brighter dawn. The crew looked at each other, their bravado rapidly deflating like a balloon losing air. The flames, still wild, began to latch greedily onto the dry grain, but they didn't have the numbers to withstand both Henry's fire and flame. He was not alone in this fight. He was fighting for those who came before him and those who would follow. He shouted, the words infused with the strength of the land. "I won't watch you destroy what generations have built." The fire crackled in response, but it wasn't only the field that battled, it was also their resolve. In that moment, the crew saw past their own greed and the chaos they thrived upon. They could see the flickering truth in Henry's spirit, living proof that while fire could burn, it could also nourish and grow. The past mingled with the present, igniting fear and uncertainty as they stared into the man and his faith. Panic began to bloom among them, and one by one, they slipped back, forming a retreat like shadows during dawn. They would not stay to be consumed. Henry would not only battle the fire of his crop, but also ignite a fire within them, if only briefly. With each retreating step, they found the unwanted flicker of conscience lighting their path. They might have come to destroy, but in that moment, they realized they were witnesses to resilience unfolding before them. As the flames began to subside, Henry's heart raced, pumping strong against his chest, each beat a reminder he was still standing. The flames danced their last angry waltz, smoldering into showers of embers that flickered beneath the heavy night sky. He was a farmer, but most importantly, he was a fighter, a keeper of stories, heir to his own belief in persistence. With the crew fading into the dusk, a calm settled over the field. The battle had left its scars, but they were scars of hope. The fire that started with malicious intent had ignited something beautiful, the spirit of resilience against the face of destruction. Henry stood there, watching the embers fade, knowing the fight was not over. The shadows of uncertainty would always remain, but as long as fire burned within him, he would keep tending to his land and nurturing the flames of hope. And though the crew had tried to burn it all, they couldn't extinguish the fire of a farmer who loved his land. In those quiet moments, while the last whispers of flame simmered down, Henry felt an unshakable bond with the land he had loved, the promise he made to protect it, and the knowing that sometimes it's the smallest fire within that keeps hope alive. Flames burst forth suddenly, crackling into the night, illuminating the silhouettes of the crew as they danced around the blaze with reckless abandon. Just moments before, the field had been a sea of golden wheat, kissed by the setting sun. Now it was morphing into a monstrous inferno, swallowing everything in its path. Laughter echoed wickedly through the night as they reveled in their malicious work, unaware that they had awakened something fierce and primal. In the heart of this chaos stood a farmer named Jacob, his weathered hands clenched into fists at his side, heart pounding with every crackle of the flames. He had watched them approach, a group of young men cloaked in arrogance, believing they could take whatever they wanted. But they didn't understand the depth of his passion, the soul intertwined with this land. They thought it was just soil dirt to be scorched, but to Jacob, it was a legacy, the blood, sweat, and tears of generations escaping into the air. With every flicker of the flame, memories washed over him. His father had toiled through rainstorms, laughed in the sunlight, and cursed during droughts, every moment a testament to love for this land. Jacob had inherited that love, nurturing it with dreams of a bountiful harvest each year. But dreams could become nightmares in the blink of an eye. As the fire blazed brighter, Jacob felt an unfamiliar heat rising within him, a fire fueled by desperation and fierce determination. He couldn't just stand idly by as they sought to obliterate everything he cherished. It wasn't just about crops, it was about a piece of himself, a life stitched together through struggle and tenacity. The crew, in their youthful bravado, didn't notice as Jacob started to move, instinct kicking in. Quiet resolve gripped his heart as he sprinted toward the barn, where he kept a secret weapon, an old fire truck. It hadn't seen action in years, its paint chipped and tires flat, but its water tank still held the promise of life. This was their last chance. Behind him, the laughter still echoed, mingling with the roar of the fire, a symphony of destruction playing against the backdrop of his determination. When Jacob reached the barn, his heart raced violently as he gripped the rusted door handle. Memories flooded back as he yanked it open, the smell of hay, the sight of tools that hadn't moved in a decade, and the fire truck patiently waiting for a moment like this. It was a futile effort, a forgotten relic, but so was he, a man ready to fight. Jacob climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key with a trembling hand. The engine sputtered like a tired old man, coughing and wheezing. "Come on," he urged through gritted teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. The crew's laughter rang out from the fields like a taunt, and doubt gnawed at his mind. What if it wouldn't start? What if he was too late? Finally, a low growl erupted from the engine, morphing into a steady roar that filled him with renewed vigor. He gripped the steering wheel and pumped the brakes as he pulled out of the barn, determined to make a stand. He'd spent too many nights tending to his crops alone, too many hours envisioning this farm's future to let it all go up in flames. As the fire truck rumbled towards the inferno, the crew turned, laughter fading into confusion. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected him to fight back. Jacob slammed on the horn, the sound echoing through the trees. He bellowed, voice strong and steady despite the pounding of his heart. The crew traded uncertain glances, aware they had crossed a line, yet emboldened by their fiery destruction. One of them mockingly shouted, sneering as he placed a hand on his hip. They thought they could intimidate him, but they did not understand what this land meant to Jacob or the fire that now burned within him. With determination blazing in his chest, Jacob parked the fire truck at the edge of the field. The flames leaped high, a wild beast roaring with pure hunger, yet he felt the key to its defeat was slipping through his fingers. He activated the pump, water shooting out like a lifeline. He aimed the hose at the fiery tendrils that danced maliciously, pushing against the violent orange storm. The water met the flames in an explosion of steam, and for a moment, it felt like time stood still. The fire hissed, spitting angrily in response as its insatiable hunger met resistance. Each burst of water felt like reclaiming a piece of his soul, each spray a step toward victory over the chaos. He was fighting not just for the wheat, but for every dream tied to this land, the laughter of children, the sacrifices of his family, the warmth of a home. But the crew was not backing down easily. They saw the fire truck, saw Jacob's defiance, and their youthful arrogance returned. They shouted comments, capturing their bravado with pointed gestures for their audience. They didn't see the fire rising within Jacob's, a different kind of flame, a will forged in loss, shaped by perseverance. With every minute, the battle escalated. Flames loomed tall, reaching toward the sky, but Jacob's heart remained fierce. He dodged the crew as they approached, emboldened now, intent on finding ways to cut him down, not just the flames. Their taunts fueled his resolve, reminding him of everything he had fought for. He couldn't let them take that away from him. He whispered to himself, his breath shallow but determination unwavering. He adjusted the nozzle, directing the water with newfound purpose. The flames swirled playfully, teasing him as they consumed the wheat, but with each pulse he noticed something amazing. The fire began to retreat. He roared back, reclaiming space lost, reminding the crew that he wouldn't cower. "You think this is a game?" Jacob shouted as the crew hesitated. Jacob's fire was igniting, but it wasn't just the flames from the hose shooting forth. His spirit burned, bright and unyielding. Now the crew felt the subtle shift. They began looking at each other, uncertainty clouding their bravado. In the back of their minds lingered a realization, a flicker of guilt creeping in, entwining with their pride. They had expected an easy target, but Jacob was fighting for something deeper, something beyond their comprehension. But laughter bubbled up again, fear mingling into mockery, a cruel shield against their own dawning realization. "Look at him," one of them said, but even he could hear the tremor in his voice. They were losing steam, and they didn't even know it yet. They were tired of chasing hopeless flames, while Jacob, with every gallon he poured out, turned ashes back into life. But as his hose continued to spray, Jacob noticed something else rising within him. A collective energy he hadn't anticipated, a fire kindled not just by anger but by hope swelling in his chest. This was more than saving crops. It was a reclamation of everything that mattered. With each burst of water, the wheat seemed to shimmer, sparks flickering in defiance of the flames. He yelled, feeling the energy of his ancestors flowing through him, gifting him strength. The legacy of every farmer before him surged, and soon something astonishing happened. The flames began to diminish, retreating as if retreating from his growing resolve. The crew stood shocked, some stepping back as the fire began to bow to the relentless stream, surrendering ground inch by inch. Jacob felt the tide turning. Every ounce of fury in his soul pushed him forward. He could feel the tide shifting, the flames faltering against his relentless determination. But even amidst the triumph unfolding, he knew the fight wasn't over. The crew seemed lost, clouded in confusion and frustration. They could either continue forcing the flames on this land, or they could retreat and find another twisted thrill somewhere else. "Now," Jacob called, voice strong, "if you've got the courage to fight, show it." The daring challenge echoed across the field, a defiant reminder that sometimes courage is found in choosing not to destroy, to walk away instead. As the embers began to settle, uncertainty brimmed in the air. One by one, the crew began to step back. Laughter faded into silence, replaced by the sound of crackling flames subdued. They hesitated, realizing they could walk away or stand side by side with Jacob. One young man, visibly shaken, raised his hands in defeat. "Let's go." With that word echoed through the crew, the others followed suit, realizing the choices before them. They turned, their bravado extinguished like the flames that had raged around them. As they retreated into the darkness, Jacob felt it, the heart of a warrior awakening deep within him. The fire truck's steady stream broke the tension, the flames curling back, flickering feebly against the water. And finally, with every last spark met with relentless water, the fire dimmed down to a whisper. In the wake of the chaos, silence filled the evening air, the silhouette of a farmer standing tall against the horizon. Jacob gazed out over the land, heart swelling with gratitude and relief. The battle had been fierce, but he was still standing, a sentinel guarding his cherished life, ready to nurture growth from ashes. And in that moment, Jacob let out a deep, cleansing breath and knew that true courage is not just found in fire or fury. It is found in standing firm, ready to fight for every ounce of hope, and remembering always that one person can ignite the flames of resilience, no matter how fierce the blaze may seem. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson, but the beauty of the evening was overshadowed by an impending storm of chaos. A band of reckless youths gathered at the edge of the farmland, their laughter ringing out like cackles in the quiet. They were armed with torches, and their minds buzzed with the thrill of mischief, unaware of the fire they would soon awaken. In front of them lay an expanse of golden wheat, standing tall and proud, until now. Farther down the field, just beyond the harvest, there was a farmer named Eli. He was a man of the earth, with hands roughened by years of toil and a heart full of dreams. The land was not just where he planted seeds, it was his life's work, a canvas painted with sweat, love, and history passed down through generations. As the shadows of mischief advanced, Eli sensed the rising tide of destruction, their flickering torches reflecting in alarmed eyes, bringing air thick with dread and smoke. With every burst of laughter from the group, Eli felt the knot in his stomach tighten. He had witnessed many storms in his life, but this felt different. It wasn't rain that threatened to douse his dreams. It was flames hungry for chaos, flames that intended to turn his life's work into ashes. The crew wanted to burn it all, to wipe away the legacy that defined him, and they believed they could do so with ease. But Eli had a fire of his own, one that burned deep within his soul. It was a fire forged by years of hard work and perseverance, a fire that saw beyond mere crops to the heart of a community that depended on them. And as he stood at the precipice of this moment, he felt that fire become alive, igniting courage in the face of fear. He stepped forward, feet heavy with resolve, as the crew began to encircle the field, hooting and hollering like it was just another game. Eli shouted, voice steady but laced with urgency. The laughter faded for a moment, replaced by a dull silence that absorbed the night. They turned back to him, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion. They hadn't expected him to confront them. One of them shouted, a sneer crossing his face. Their confidence burst forth, thinking his words were merely an echo in the wind. "I don't just think it," Eli responded, squaring his shoulders, feeling the weight of not just his years, but the years of those before him. "I know it." The crew fell silent for just a moment, the air heavy around them with tension. They were young, perhaps naive, but in his fiery eyes they felt an ancient strength. Eli's heart raced, the truth burning brighter within him. He wasn't merely defending fields. He was guarding every laugh shared under these trees, every moment of struggle and triumph that resided within these very acres. Then one of the youth stepped closer, torches raised high. "What's a single farmer gonna do? You can't take us all." Eli felt the anger bubble within him, a surge of frustration that they could see his life as a game, a joke. But he took a deep breath, inhaling the sense of soil and ripe grain before calming the storm inside. "You think this is fun? You think someone's home is a playground? I've poured my blood, sweat, and tears into this land." But they just laughed again, gathering strength from each other's mockery. Eli could feel their confidence turning into a twisted sense of power, feeding off their childish bravado. He understood their psychology. They thrived on the chaos and the thrill generated by the fire. It was easier to be part of something reckless than to own up to their choices. As they started to close in, Eli made a quick decision. He turned and ran toward the barn, his heart pounding. There was no time to waste, and in that small wooden structure lay something that could change the course of this night. The barn doors creaked open. Inside was more than just equipment. It was his legacy, every tool a reminder of those who had stood before him, the hands that had built, nurtured, and fought for this land. His eyes searched until they fell upon an old fire truck. It wasn't just a relic of the past, it had the potential for life. It was dusty and rusted, but it was still functional. He sprang inside, fumbling with the keys as his mind raced with possibilities. He could stop them, he could fight back. The engine sputtered to life, a wheezing cough that echoed through the barn. Eli urged, desperation threading through his resolve. Outside, the crew had begun their reckless dance around the flames, and as they lit the first torches, they ignited the wheat with whoops of glee. Their shadows twisted and turned, mocking the seriousness of Eli's fight. The flames leaped upward, hungry and wild, devouring the very essence of his dreams. But inside the barn, the fire truck roared to life. Heart racing, Eli guided the truck out into the open, backlit by the flames spreading across the field. He pumped the water through the massive hose, pointing the nozzle toward the violent fire. It felt like preparing for a war. There wasn't just fire here. There was a spirit fighting for survival. He shouted, hoping the gravity of his voice would pull them from their frenzy. "This is your last chance." But the crew had gone too far, enraptured by flames, enthralled by chaos. Eli squeezed the lever, sending a stream of water soaring into the night. The moment the liquid met the flames, a hiss erupted, a fierce battle beginning between fire and water. It was an explosion of steam, a testament to the fight within him. And soon it wasn't just the flames roaring anymore. The crew turned, their laughter faltering, eyes widening as they saw the once dominant fire meet resistance. Eli pressed on, power pulsing through the hose as he directed the water onto the flames, wielding it like a sword against an invisible enemy. He could feel his spirit rise, pulling strength from the earth beneath him. But the youth stood their ground, unsure of how to react. They hadn't expected this kind of fight from a farmer. What they saw was not just an old man, but a pillar of resilience, defiance rising in the face of pure destruction. Each blast of water seemed to take back what had been theirs for far too long, the laughter of generations, the echoes of laughter, hope, and hard work. Undeterred, one of the crew stepped forward again, defiantly raising his torch. "You think you can put this fire out?" With that challenge hanging in the air, Eli held firm, refusing to blink. "I'm not just one guy, I'm a part of this land. I am history." He could see their bravado begin to crack. There in the flames' glow, the shadows of doubt started to creep in. They hadn't prepared for a real fight. They thought they could destroy with abandon, but Eli was showing them resilience, showing them what it meant to stand up for something greater than themselves. He relaxed his grip for a moment, allowing the water to cascade down, feeling a wave of sweat trickle down his brow, but his heart was steady. "Look around you. This isn't fun, this is life. If you walk away now, you have a chance to do something right." One of the younger members hesitated again, the torch wavering in his grip. But Eli shook his head slowly, feeling the heat of the moment crackle in the air. It's never just a field. It's memories, love, laughter, and life itself. Every inch of this land tells a story, and it's one you are ready to wipe away. With each word, he watched their confidence begin to retire, uncertainty creeping in like the night around them. Eli felt strength rising in his chest. This was more than just a battle against fire. This was a battle for hearts and minds, a chance to reach into the depths of their youthful bravado and bring to light the truth of their destructive path. Finally, the initial bravado melted away, and Eli seized the moment. He stepped forward, arms raised, declaring with passion, "You can walk away from this. Choose life over destruction." The crew began to murmur among themselves, a hushed conversation stealing away their bravado. Something shifted. Perhaps it was the realization that they weren't invincible. Perhaps it was the understanding that they could unleash fire but not the spirit that truly mattered. The flames behind Eli might have been fierce and wild, but he stood in front of them tall and unyielding. He wasn't just fighting for the crops, but for the very essence of community and togetherness. He was not just a farmer. He was a guardian of a future that would be brighter than tonight. The torch wavered more in the hands of the crew member, who finally dropped it, watching as it fell uselessly to the ground. A few others followed suit, echoes of uncertainty mingling with the faint crackle of the fire. They stood at a crossroads, a choice to ignite destruction or champion life. With wild eyes, Eli released another jet of water onto the flames, pushing back with relentless determination. The blaze hissed and sputtered. Suddenly the ground was a battlefield of survival, not just against fire, but against the shadows lurking within each of them. The crew, visibly shaken, began to step back. Their laughter had turned to uncertainty. The fire, once a symbol of chaotic power, started to transform before their eyes. They sensed it, the energy shift as the flames dimmed against the surge of water, against the fire that lived within Eli's heart. "Let it go," Eli urged. "Walk away, learn from this, and become stronger." As the crew turned to each other, the grip of peer pressure loosened. They weren't just a band of reckless troublemakers anymore. They would become more if only they lent an ear to their conscience, to a voice urging them to transcend. They took a collective step back, shifting their weight between the flames and the choice to leave. Eli's heart swelled as the first member turned away completely, a slow retreat into the shelter of the night. "Let's just go," he called out, and one by one, the others followed suit, torn between youthful folly and the undeniable truth laid bare by the resilience of the farmer before them. As they faded into the shadows, Eli felt the last breath of tension release, the fire behind him sputtering into a gentle glow. The wind shifted, and with it came a sense of relief but also pride. He had stood tall, not just for himself, but for everyone who had fought and cultivated this land. In that moment of silence that followed the storm, Eli knew they had left more than just the field behind. They had left behind the choice to destroy, and in doing so, he found hope for the future. This battle was not just about brawn, strength, or fire. It was about the depth of the spirit, the fire that could shine even in the darkest nights. And as he looked out over the land, steeped in the warmth of the afterglow, Eli knew that while fire could burn, it could also nurture. Like the smoldering embers before him, life would always find a way to begin anew, as long as someone was willing to stand and fight for it. The laughter echoed through the stillness of the countryside, a chorus of youthful recklessness that cut through the golden haze of a late summer evening. The crew gathered at the edge of the farmer's land, torches flickering with excitement, their eyes glinting with mischief. They had come with a purpose, ready to set fire to the sprawling fields of wheat, ready to leave behind a trail of destruction, a thoughtless act that thrilled them. But what they didn't realize was that they were stepping into a story far bigger than their reckless ambitions. In a weathered farmhouse not far away, a figure stood at the window, watching the shadows dance across the grass, heart pounding against his chest. This was not just any farmer. This was Jacob, a man carved from the earth he tilled, the very embodiment of resilience. And today, he would not just stand by. As the crew prepared to ignite their torches, Jacob felt the fire within him flicker to life. It wasn't anger he felt, though there was plenty of that stirring in his veins. It was a deep-seated determination, a primal urge to protect what belonged to him, what generations before him had nurtured. He could see in his mind's eye the years of sweat and toil, the laughter of his children echoing through the fields, and the hopes of a community that depended on the harvest. He shouted, stepping onto the porch, voice carrying through the cool evening air as he faced the group. The laughter halted abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence. The crew turned, surprise plastered on their faces like a mask. They hadn't expected a confrontation. They thought they could do as they pleased, but Jacob stood before them, a force of nature ready to fight. One of the youths called out, his bravado faltering under Jacob's steady gaze. Jacob asked, his voice low and steady, cutting through the tension. Ignoring him, they hoisted their torches higher, eager to continue their destructive plans. Flames danced playfully at the tips, flickering like the very chaos in their hearts. Jacob felt a rush of frustration, a tightness in his chest. They didn't understand what they were risking. This land was more than dirt. It was a legacy, a history woven into the fabric of his being. With each passing second, the air thickened with anticipation, the muted sounds of the night amplifying the weight of the moment. Jacob's heart raced as he took a step forward, his mind racing with memories. He saw his father, weathered hands telling stories through callous gestures. He felt his mother's warmth on winter nights as they gathered around the fire, sharing dreams and hopes intertwined with the soil beneath their feet. The laughter swelled again, a mix of arrogance and thrill, but Jacob wasn't one to back down. He felt an ember ignite within him, a fire fueled not just by fear but by hope and conviction. If you light that fire, you'll burn down more than just crops. The words lingered in the air, and for a moment, doubt flickered in the eyes of the crew. They saw not just a farmer, but a guardian, a man fully aware of what was at stake. One of them challenged, voice dripping with sarcasm. "More than you could ever understand," Jacob shot back, resolve crystallizing in his voice. "This is our home. What you see as fun is our livelihood, our history. It's a place of memories, laughter, and love. You can choose to walk away and be part of something good, or you can destroy." But before he could finish, the youth who had been the loudest stepped forward, torch ready. "You think we care about your sob story? This is about power." In that instant, Jacob realized they were lost, not to the flames, but to themselves. They had traded empathy for bravado, replaced respect with arrogance. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on him, grounding him in a way they could not grasp. "I have a fire too," he declared, his voice steady despite the raging emotions swirling within. "One that burns for every sacrifice made, for every drop of sweat that watered these fields. My fire doesn't destroy." There was a moment of silence, the crew momentarily stunned. Jacob could see the wheels turning in their heads, doubt beginning to eclipse arrogance. "You think you can just burn it all down?" The leader of the crew scoffed, yet the bravado wasn't robust anymore, tinged with uncertainty. "What are you going to do?" Jacob allowed himself a moment of clarity, recalling a dusty old fire truck hidden away in the barn. It hadn't been used in years, and its engine had long grown cold. But the water stored inside, deep within that tank, had the potential. This was his last chance to protect everything he held dear. He ran toward the barn, heart pounding in rhythm with the memory of everything he loved. The crew erupted in laughter again, unsure of what he was doing, mocking his retreat as they edged closer to their goal. But Jacob wasn't afraid. He was a man prepared to defend his legacy. He flung open the barn doors, the familiar scent of hay and old wood wrapping around him like an embrace. It felt like stepping back in time. There it was, the fire truck, a relic of an era he dreamed of reviving. Climbed inside, fumbling for the keys, the engine sputtering and coughing at first, as if sharing his nervousness. "Come on," he shouted, urging the engine with all his might. The crew continued their mindless chatter outside, unaware that their worst fear was about to arrive. With a final sputter, the truck roared to life, filling Jacob with conviction and strength. He took a moment to embrace that feeling. As he drove toward the field, the familiar sight of the golden wheat transformed into a daunting wall of flames. The crew had set their torches to the earth, and fire was reaching up into the sky with a ferocity he hadn't anticipated. Yet the fire within him wasn't just for himself anymore. It now burned brighter for everyone who depended on him. He pointed the hose toward the frantic flames and squeezed the lever, releasing a torrent of water into the inferno. The water met the flames like a battle cry, hissing with ferocity, steam rising as if the land itself was fighting back. Jacob felt a surge of hope. This was his moment of truth. He shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos, and for a split second time slowed. The crew turned, shock written across their faces as they witnessed their destruction meet resistance. Their excitement, once palpable, began to diminish. The flames hissed under the force of water, retreating like a wounded animal, and Jacob pressed on, confident with every burst. Each pulse of water was a step back toward control, reclaiming not just the fields but the very essence of everything that mattered. One of the crew members shouted as they watched the flames falter. Jacob yelled back, the fire within him roaring. They thought he was only defending a field. They didn't understand that every ounce of his fire was about hope, love, and continuity. Each blast of water represented generations of dreams waiting to bear fruit. The crew began to step back, uncertainty creeping into their bravado. Jacob could see it. They were realizing that fire could ignite stories but could also be extinguished. His determination forged a shield, pushing against their doubts. He asked, voice steady, using the truth as his weapon. Some of the crew members began to hesitate, glancing at one another with doubt painted on their expressions. Jacob pressed forward, his eyes shining with the fire of conviction. "Stand with me and we can create something beautiful." His words ignited something within them, sparking thoughts of what they could be beyond the flames. One by one, they stepped back, questioning if this chaos had any worth. A sense of camaraderie once shared turned brittle against the reality of their destructive choices. As he fought to push back the flames, he realized the tide of the moment was shifting. Courage could be contagious. As the youth began to lower their torches, Jacob felt a wave of triumph swell within him. Each moment turned into a testament. One person standing firm could change the course of a story, could alter the fabric of lives entwined. Finally, one of the crew dropped his torch completely, tossing it aside. "Let's go," he muttered, his voice edged with shame over the realization of their choices. The others followed suit, a collective choice forming as they turned away from the destruction they had craved. As they faded into the shadows, Jacob continued pumping water toward the dying flames until they flickered and hissed, retreating into the night. He could feel his heart still racing, the weight of the moment settling around him. It wasn't just a field that had been saved. It had been a piece of his life, his hopes, and the promise of tomorrow. Finally, with one last burst, he extinguished the final flicker of flame, and silence enveloped him like a warm blanket. He stepped down from the truck and took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the adrenaline begin to ebb away. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a survivor, a protector, a farmer who had faced down the chaos and emerged triumphant. In that quiet, still night, Jacob knew that fire had its place, a fire to create, to illuminate, and to awaken the possibilities that lay before him. The flames that once threatened to consume everything had become a reminder that resilience can shine brightest in the face of destruction. And as he gazed over the saved land, he realized that it was not just about crops. It was about legacy, the legacy of love, sacrifice, and a future worth fighting for. The crackling sound of burning wood echoed in the quiet country air, flames dancing high as the crew huddled around the fire they had just started. They cheered in reckless abandon, caught up in the thrill of destruction, barely aware of the shadows they cast against the golden fields beyond. As their laughter roared, they raised their torches, preparing to spread their fiery chaos across the vast wheat fields that belonged to old farmer Sam. But little did they know, the farmer was already aware of their plans. There he stood, backlit by the fading light of day, watching them from a distance, fists clenched at his sides. His heart thudded in his chest like the pounding of hooves, echoing the rhythm of an age-old struggle. Those fields were not just plants swaying in the breeze. They were his memories, his legacy, stitched into the fabric of his family's history. Farmer Sam had spent a lifetime tending to those crops, nurturing them day after day. Each seed sown represented a promise of harvests to come, of feeding families, and of the legacy of his father and grandfather who tilled this very land. It was blood, sweat, and deep-rooted love, and now a group of thrill-seekers thought they could burn it all to the ground. The sun dipped below the horizon as anxiety coiled in his stomach. It wasn't just anger. It felt like 1,000 storms all wrapping together into one giant mass. He turned his gaze back to the crew, their torches raised high, flames licking at the night sky. Those flames were merely a reflection of their misguided sense of power, but Sam knew the fire that burned within him was the only one capable of truly standing the test of time. With a final glance at the fields that shimmered softly in the light of dusk, Sam felt a fierce determination ignite within him. This was not just about protecting land. It was about guarding dreams, history, and a way of life that had flourished for generations. He would not let them unleash chaos on his world without a fight. Stepping off his porch, he began to walk towards them, a figure cloaked in quiet strength, grounded by grit. The crew noticed him approaching, their laughter fading into a palpable tension. Sam stopped a few feet away, heart racing as he faced down their youthful bravado. He called out, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. They exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. It was almost comical the way a group of young men, bursting with misplaced confidence, took a step back from a solitary farmer. The leader of the crew, a tall, brash young man with a wild look in his eyes, smirked. He replied, waving his torch dismissively. Sam echoed, shaking his head slowly. "You think it's fun to destroy something you don't understand. You're playing with fire, not just literally, but in the most dangerous way. Those crops are more than just plants, they are lives." The crew laughed again, the sound harsh in the stillness, but doubt hung in the air like a dense fog. The initial thrill was beginning to wane, and Sam felt a flicker of hope that he could reach them. "You don't realize the damage you're about to inflict. I've spent years growing these, pouring myself into each harvest." For a moment, the bravado waned, and the crew looked at one another. But the leader pushed through the silence. "You can't stop us, old man." Sam's heart sank, a weight settling in his chest. They weren't just blowing off steam, they were deliberately choosing destruction. And amidst their laughter, he could hear something darker, the tension, the thrill of chaos that plagued their youth. The psychology of mischief, of thinking oneself invincible, was a dangerous game, and they were losing sight of the real stakes. But he wasn't going to back down. He took a step closer, eyes burning with intensity. "You may think you can walk away unscathed, but every flicker of flame could take with it the heart of this community. What will you tell your families when they ask what you did last night?" His voice rose, solid and unyielding, cutting through their bravado like a knife. "Men like me are forged from the fire of our struggles and our triumphs. Those fields are a testament to that fight." Something flickered in the eyes of the leader. Sam could see it, a glimmer of recognition that steadied his heart. But then it was gone, replaced again by wild arrogance. "We're just having a good time." Sam turned back toward the fields, determination swirling within him. He had something better than words. It was the depth of his spirit, his will to protect what was right. He took a deep breath and felt that deep-rooted fire reignite, fueled by desperation. This was his home, his life's work, and he would not let them take it away without a fight. In a burst of resolve, he bolted toward the barn, his mind racing with possibilities. The crew laughed behind him, pushing their torches even closer to the igniting wheat, mocking his retreat, but he didn't care. He needed to act. Inside the barn, things were still and quiet, a sanctuary amidst the impending storm. Dust floated in the air like tiny specks of hope as he rummaged through the old tools, memories flooding back with each forgotten item he uncovered. He hurried until he found what he was looking for, a forgotten fire truck that had served him many years ago. It was rusty and old, but still held a reservoir of water in its tank water that would be his weapon against the impending destruction. He jumped into the truck, fingers trembling slightly as he fumbled for the keys. They were somewhere beneath piles of dust and old tools, lost to time. Come on, he muttered, desperately searching until finally he found them and turned the ignition. The truck roared to life and his heart soared with newfound hope. With the engine chugging, he drove towards the fields, determination coursing through his veins. As he pulled up closer to the flames, he could barely comprehend the chaos unfolding before him. The crew was completely consumed by the fire's embrace, oblivious to the consequences, their laughter mingling with the crackling sound of burning crops. With every fiber of his being, Sam aimed the hose at the blazing inferno and squeezed the lever, sending a stream of powerful water into the chaos. The flames sputtered in surprise, and for a moment the whole scene felt surreal, like a battle line drawn in the sand. He roared, voice carrying like thunder through the night. The crew turned, their laughter fading as they witnessed their destruction being challenged. Sam pressed on, relentless, fueling his resolve with each moment he poured forth the water. One of them shouted, stepping back, eyes wide with disbelief. The intensity of their plans hung in the balance, and the weight of Sam's determination pressed down on them. He wasn't merely fighting flames. He was pushing against the tide of reckless abandon, the crushing thrill of destruction, and he felt the fire of his ancestors blazing within him. The leader shouted, grasping his own torch tightly, refusing to step back. The crew felt their bravado inflating again, but Sam remained rooted, pouring water steadily onto the wildfire, each burst a warning that would not be ignored. "I can't just stand by while you destroy everything I've built," he replied, voice filled with conviction. "Every plant you burn is a memory lost, a legacy erased. Look around you, this is life, this is community." The leader hesitated, uncertainty creeping into their ranks. Sam could sense the shift in energy, a sliver of realization breaking through their clouded judgment. The flames roared behind him, but the fire in his spirit blazed brighter. He asked earnestly, the weight of his words sinking in. Silence fell over the crew, hesitation etching lines on their faces as they exchanged glances. There was a power in Sam's determination, an undeniable conviction that pushed against their excitement and enthusiasm for chaos. He could see it in their eyes, the flicker of doubt igniting a decision. Finally, one of the members stepped back, shaking his head. "I can't do this," he muttered, dropping his torch. The others watched, uncertainty bubbling within their ranks. And then came another surrender, another drop of flame extinguished. One by one, the crew began to step back, their once wild laughter replaced by a solemn understanding. They had overstepped, and in confronting their recklessness, they were choosing to turn away from destruction. "Let's go," shouted the leader, the defiance in his voice flickering as he turned to follow his friends retreating into the night. Sam watched as they faded into the shadows, their fire extinguished not by flames but by a choice. He continued to spray the areas that were smoldering, the remnants of their chaos flickering against the backdrop of the night, and he exhaled deeply. As the last creases of tension released in the air, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had stood firm, not just for his fields but for a deeper truth. The fire they had attempted to unleash had met a greater fire, one that couldn't be extinguished, a fire of hope, resilience, and a connection to the land that ran deeper than blood. In the quiet aftermath, Jacob surveyed the fields, feeling gratitude bloom in his heart. Smoke hung in the air, but as he looked closely, he saw that the majority of the crops remained intact. They had survived the night. He took a deep breath, letting the scents of earth, grass, and smoke mingle into one reminders of struggles that had built him into who he was. Tonight, they had found a different kind of fire, one of realization, of understanding. Those crops symbolized something bigger than himself. They were a link between past and future, a continuity that would carry on as long as someone was willing to fight for it. With a new sense of purpose igniting within, Farmer Sam knew that while flames could consume, they could also spark powerful transformations. This battle wasn't just about saving land. It was about nurturing a legacy that would continue to flourish, a legacy of hope, courage, and resilience. And in the heart of the countryside, that fire would always burn bright. The ominous sound of laughter carried through the night, a twisted symphony of delight that danced across the fields of grain. The crew had gathered 5 young men fueled by boredom and an adrenaline-fueled desire to create chaos. They smeared dirt on their faces and hoisted torches aloft, reflecting the flickering firelight in their eyes, eager to unleash destruction upon Farmer James's vast fields of wheat. Just a short distance away, Farmer James stood frozen at the edge of his property, heart racing, watching the group prepare for their reckless stunt. He could feel the dread curling in his stomach, a mix of anger and despair washing over him. This land wasn't just a patch of soil, it was home. It was a canvas woven with memories of laughter shared with family, of sweat poured into the earth, of nurturing crops through every season and storm. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows, and the bright torches illuminated a stark contrast against the twilight sky. James felt a surge of dread. If they lit those torches and set fire to the wheat, a lifetime of dedication would go up in flames in mere moments. He pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the weight of generations bearing down on him, memories flashing through his mind like a slideshow. He thought of his father who had taught him how to plow the fields, and his mother who had nurtured not just the land but him, filling their home with love and warmth. The thought ignited a fire within him, a fierce blaze fueled by his love for the land and everything it represented. He shouted, his voice cutting through the fading laughter. Crew turned, surprise flickering across their faces, a moment of hesitation in the charged air as they faced the figure of the farmer. They had expected no resistance. They had considered this field theirs for the taking, an easy target for their reckless fun. The leader of the group, a tall young man with disheveled hair and a gleam of mischief in his eyes, stepped forward, holding his torch aloft like a victory flag. He sneered, the bravado in his voice concealing a hint of uncertainty. "You're just one guy." James took a breath, steadying the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "You think this is just wheat? This land is my life. You want to destroy my future." His voice trembled with passion, each word biting into the night. Laughter erupted again from the crew, a bubble of chaos rising around them. "You're being dramatic." Someone shouted back, eliciting a chorus of agreement and further taunts. They all shared a laugh, a sense of invincibility coursing through them, but deep down, uncertainty began to flicker as they faced the farmer's unwavering stance. James could see it in their eyes, the foolish pride, but also the fragile illusion of power. They had grown up in a world where boredom and mischief often turned into cruelty, yet they hadn't faced the fire of someone who cared desperately for what he stood to lose. James asked, allowing silence to stretch between them. "You don't understand the cost of what you're about to do. What if this ends badly? What if the fire spreads beyond what you can control?" The crew hesitated, uncertainty creeping into their ranks, but the leader, unwilling to show weakness, just chuckled derisively. "You're just a farmer." James stepped forward, fury igniting within him. He cried, his voice rising above the growing tension. "The power to cultivate life, to nurture the earth. I know what it means to fight for this land, to rise before dawn and toil until dusk." He could hear the creaking of doubt in one of the younger voices echoing behind the leader, and it sparked a hidden hope within him. He pressed on, urgency lacing his words. "I'm not just protecting crops, I'm protecting a legacy. You might think it's fun now, but who do you want to be at the end of the day? Arsonists." For a moment, a silence fell. The crew exchanged nervous glances, the bravado beginning to fade as they understood the gravity of the moment. But the leader, relentless in his denial, waved his torch again, daring. "You really think you can stop us?" James felt his heart hammering. "Maybe I'm just one man, but I won't let you burn this land." And as though his words had awoken something within him, James turned and raced toward the barn, his spirit ignited. He could hear their laughter rising again, mocking him, but he didn't care. In the barn lay a relic of history, a fire truck that had belonged to his father, rusty but still capable. This was his last hope. He burst through the barn doors, the scent of varnish and old wood wrapping around him like an embrace. Memories flooded his mind as he rummaged through old tools, heart pounding with a sense of purpose. There it was, hidden behind a stack of old crates, the fire truck. Years of dust coated it, a symbol of what it meant to fight against despair. With tremors of disbelief and hope, he jumped inside the cab. The ignition sputtered at first, and anxiety twisted in his stomach as he fumbled for the keys buried beneath the mess. "Come on," he urged, his voice thick with urgency. At last, the engine roared to life, shaking off its years of neglect. The sound resonated like a call to arms, stirring something within him. As James drove the fire truck forward, the laughter of the crew faded, replaced by an eerie silence. They hadn't expected him to fight back. They hadn't considered that he could be a force to be reckoned with. He aimed the fire truck toward the flames, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The crew began to back away, their bravado faltering as they watched him approach. He had a weapon now, not just a truck, but the spirit of each farmer who had worked this land before him. With determination fueling him, James aimed the hose toward the roaring inferno that threatened to engulf the crops. He shouted, voice steady. He squeezed the lever, sending a powerful stream of water right at the flames. The impact was explosive, a hiss of steam erupting as the water met the fire. For a moment the flames retreated, as if recognition flickered through their wild tongues, bewildered by the sudden resistance. The crew could only watch, stunned into silence as they began to understand the seriousness of their miscalculations. James pressed on, pouring everything he had into the fight. Each burst of water was laced with the legacy of all he held dear. He bellowed through the chaos, "Try to destroy this fire, my fire." The flames hissed angrily, still roaring defiantly, but James's fight pushed against them like a wave crashing on shore. It was a powerful struggle, and he could feel the tide turning. The crew, once so confident, began to shrink back, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. "Stop!" One of them yelled, nervous laughter melting into dismay as they recognized the reality of what they had almost done. The bravado was there, but the edge had dulled. James turned his full attention to the leader, aiming the hose in his direction as if to punctuate his point. "This isn't just about me against you. This is bigger than all of us. It's about accountability." Every word he spoke held a weight that hung in the air, heavy, resonant, and impossible to ignore. With each surge of water, the message became clearer. Fire can destroy, but it can also forge resilience. The crew stepped back, hesitant now, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. They watched as the flames began to dissipate, the water pushing the fire back bit by bit. "Look," said one of the younger members quietly. "This isn't worth it. We're just going to burn it all for what?" And with those words, a shift occurred. The crew fell silent, sharing tentative glances. The laughter that had once echoed so cruelly faded into the night, replaced by the dawning understanding of what was truly at stake. James seized the moment, pouring more water onto the flames until they began to fade into glowing embers. "You have the power to choose," he called out, voice steady and firm. "Choose to be better, to walk away." As one by one they dropped their torches, the realization of their actions washed over them, a heavy burden ready to be lifted. They were not just a crew of fools, they were capable of making choices that could uplift or tear down. "Let's just go," one of them finally said, stepping back. James watched as they turned away, retreating into the shadows, their heads bowed, their laughter silenced. As they disappeared into the night, he felt a surge of triumph, knowing he had stood firm. As the last ember flickered and died, a sigh of relief washed over him. The weight of what had almost been felt suffocating yet exhilarating, and he knew that he had saved not just crops but the spirit of a legacy built on hard work, love, and the fire of resilience. In the quiet aftermath, James stood watching the field, a sense of peace settling over him. The night was still, the winds rolling gently in the distance. He understood that the fight had not just been against flames, but also against a wayward mindset built on recklessness. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, knowing now that real power lies not just in strength, but in understanding and choice. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, feeling the cool night air fill his lungs. The land remained, more vibrant than ever, a steadfast reminder of everything that was worth fighting for. In Farmer James's heart, the fire still burned bright, a fire that was no longer just about crops or land, but about the promise of tomorrow, about hope nurtured and futures forged in resilience. It was a fire that would always rise to meet the challenge, one that stood ready to protect and embrace all that was good and true. The embers of the night had transformed him, reshaping his understanding of courage and legacy as he turned back towards his home, renewed and resolute. The night hung heavy with anticipation, the sounds of laughter rising and falling like a tide. 5 young men stood at the edge of Farmer Bill's sprawling fields, armed with torches and a reckless sense of power. They felt invincible, a crew of troublemakers ready to set the world ablaze, or at least his fields. The sight of the fertile land, golden and tall under the silver moonlight, only intensified their thrill. The leader boasted, his hand gripping the torch like a scepter. But just beyond the glimmering rows of wheat, Farmer Bill stood watching, rooted in place. He felt his heart hammer and a cold sweat prickle at the back of his neck. The land wasn't just a field to him. It was a monument to his life's work, a testament woven through generations. Right now, it felt like a fragile dream that could shatter with the flick of a match. Farmer Bill remembered when he was a boy, running through these very fields, his laughter echoing against the horizon, playing tag with his siblings. He could hear his father's voice, stern yet filled with warmth, reminding him to respect the land. He had inherited this responsibility like a sacred trust, and he wouldn't let anyone tear it apart. As the crew edged closer, their laughter morphed into jeers, fueled by youthful bravado. One of them sneered. Inside, Farmer Bill could feel a storm brewing. Anger and fear twisted in his gut, but those feelings morphed into something sharper, more potent, a fire of his own, one that spoke of courage and protection. He shouted, voice booming across the night. The laughter fell silent, their eyes flickering from the flames to the figure of the farmer, standing resolute against the glowing backdrop of the moon. The leader shot back, a smirk creeping onto his face. "You don't understand what you're playing with," Farmer Bill said, stepping forward. "This isn't just dirt. You're standing on my legacy, on the sweat of my family's history." The leader laughed, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. He shared a look with his friends, and for a fleeting moment, Farmer Bill could see doubt creeping in. But the bravado of youth is a powerful cloak, hard to pierce and even harder to remove. "Really?" One of the crew snickered, brandishing his torch. Farmer Bill shouted back, his heart racing. "These fields have been in my family for generations. I've poured everything I have into this land, hours of work, love, heartache." With a tilt of his head, the leader signaled his crew. Laughter boiled up again, reckless and wild. They cackled, igniting their torches and shoving them forward, ready to unleash their chaos. Something cracked deep inside Farmer Bill. He turned and ran towards the barn, his heart pounding like war drums, the fire within him roaring to life. Memories flooded back, working alongside his father, learning the ropes, soaking in the weight of tradition. He growled under his breath. Inside the barn, the familiar scent of hay and rust filled his lungs. He knew what he needed, the old fire truck that stood waiting, discarded but still capable. It was time. He hurried past overturned buckets and rusty tools until he found it, his father's fire truck, dusty but functional. It was time to show them real fire. With shaky fingers, he found the keys buried beneath clutter. As he turned the ignition, the engine sputtered. He pleaded, adrenaline coursing through him. Finally, it roared to life, filling the barn with a deep growl that felt like a battle cry. When he emerged from the barn, the crew had formed a circle, flinging torches into the dry wheat. Flames leaped to life, crackling hungrily as they lit up the night. Farmer Bill's heart dropped. This wasn't just vandalism, it was destruction on a grand scale, and he had to act. He shouted as he hopped into the truck, sending a spray of dirt and gravel flying behind him. The crew turned, surprise and confusion flashing across their faces. He aimed the hose at the flames, determined to fight back. He bellowed, squeezing the lever. Water shot out like a cannon, crashing into the flames with a fierce hiss. The crew recoiled in shock, momentarily silenced by the stream of water breaking apart their destructive fun. But the leader, rallying himself, charged forward. "You think you can put it out with a hose?" Farmer Bill's heart raced as he pumped more water onto the raging fire. Each blast pushed back against their flames, and he could see doubt creeping back into the eyes of the crew. They hadn't expected him to fight back. They had underestimated his resolve. He shouted, voice steady despite the chaos. "This land is more than just crops." The flames hissed and crackled, fighting back fiercely. He could see the fire spreading, spitting angrily at the encroaching water. Fear surged through him, but deep down, he felt the fire of his ancestors within him, those who had fought hard for this land, who had endured storms, droughts, and now this reckless crew. One of the younger crew members hesitated, watching as the fire began to falter. The leader shouted, tension bleeding into his voice as he waved the torch dangerously. But Farmer Bill wasn't about to back down either. He cried, desperation filling his voice. "You can walk away from this. You can choose who you want to be." As if chiseled from stone, the leader hesitated, torch raised high, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. The laughter had turned stale, a bitter realization creeping in. "Why are we doing this, man?" One of the other boys muttered, recognizing the true weight of their actions. Farmer Bill pressed, pouring water over the flames with renewed vigor. The fire spluttered, the steam rising like a spirit fighting back against chaos. "You have the chance to do something right." Moments hung in the air, and in that instant, Farmer Bill sensed a shift of fracture in their bravado. The laughter had grown hollow, the thrill of recklessness proving less seductive in the face of righteous defiance. The murmurs grew louder, cascading like waves against the shore. As they faltered, the leader sneered, struggling against the tide of doubt. "We're not scared of an old farmer," he exclaimed, but even his voice trembled now, the reality of their actions settling heavily upon them. And then it happened. One by one, the crew started to drop their torches until they clattered to the ground, extinguishing like their bravado. One of them whispered, stepping back as the flames began to flicker and dim under the onslaught of water. Farmer Bill pressed the advantage, feeling the tide turning in his favor. He pumped water with fierce determination, each burst echoing hope. He shouted, pushing against the waves of disbelief and chaos. "You can choose to be better, to walk away." With every blast of water, the flames dwindled, retreating back from the fields, their energy broken. The crew stood there, muted into submission by the truth that lay before them. As the last flames flickered, Farmer Bill stepped out of the truck, panting but triumphant. He had stood his ground, defiant against their recklessness. It had been a fierce battle, not just against fire, but against the very essence of apathy. One of the boys finally spoke. Their bravado crumbled like the burnt wheat beneath their feet. In that breathless moment, everything hung in the balance. The air crackled with tension, choices hanging like shards of glass suspended in time. For the crew, what seemed to be a night of wild fun had turned into a lesson they would never forget. Farmer Bill felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he wasn't just celebrating a saved harvest. He realized that confronting recklessness with courage could ignite change. The hope remained, teetering on the edge of transformation. But even as he turned to face the crew, a low rumble echoed through the air, one that didn't belong to the night sky. The ground beneath them trembled, and the sound morphed into a distant explosion, dread washing over him as a realization set in, a chilling wind sweeping through the fields. With a quick glance toward the horizon, his breath caught in his throat. A menacing glow began to form in the distance. Something far more powerful than torches was approaching, an inferno spurred by the winds and a dry spell, racing toward the very fields they had tried to burn. Bill's heart sank as he realized the crew hadn't just awakened the spirit of destruction. They had unleashed something far more terrifying. The fire raging on the horizon wasn't just a fleeting danger. It was a full-scale wildfire, heading straight for their fields, a force of nature that presented a threat far beyond their actions. And as the dark clouds billowed in the sky, Farmer Bill turned, adrenaline pumping like a torrent. There was no more time to waste. We have to go. With urgency eclipsing the tension, they raced back toward the fire truck, a new mission igniting within the hearts of even the most reluctant crew members. They had come to destroy, but now it seemed they were racing against a fire that threatened to consume everything they once deemed laughable. In the face of impending catastrophe, they had no choice but to unite, stepping into the chaos of responsibility, tragedy, and redemption dancing hand in hand, leaving no room for bravery or cowardice. As they surged forward into the night, the weight of survival settled around them, etching the realization that sometimes the greatest conflicts arise not in the flames, but in the choices made to douse them. The fire they had sought to ignite had awakened something deep and stirring within them all. In that fleeting moment, the line between enemies and allies began to blur beneath the weight of a shared fate, all as the distant glow grew ever closer. Would they find the strength to fight together against the looming storm, or would the flames consume them all before the dawn came breaking?